Hello. Hello, everybody. Nice time to get a hair on my eye. It's not my face. Oh my goodness. I am Oh, fun times, right? Roll with it. Hello, friend. We are here today to talk about the Gemini full moon that is coming up on December 7th or 8th, depending on your location on the planet. I am in the US in Central Time, and it's happening here very, very late in the day on December 7th. So, yeah, just adjust for your location. We are going to get into whatever wants to come through. I'll show you my notes. They consist of check it out. I got the date and the place. I got the sun happening here, Jupiter's location, since the sun's in Sag. We got the ruler thing happening. And then my grocery list. And that's basically all I have as far as preparation. It's very Gemini of me to show up basically unprepared and just roll with whatever spontaneously wants to come through. Um, the first thing that does need to come through is a bit of a channel update for my Friday live stream schedule. So I have been doing a Friday live stream since the very beginning of this year. I believe it was January 7th, but I could be slightly off there on the date. And that this is my 47th one without ever missing a time. I showed up 47 times and I intended to I really didn't have an intention, I guess, when I started doing them. I kind of thought it would go on forever. But at this point, it would appear that we meaning me, are going to be making an update to the schedule, as in, I'm no longer going to come every single Friday. I am going to continue to do the new moon and the full moon. So I'll be here every other week, Friday live streaming like I have been, and on the off weeks, no live stream. So that goes into effect right now. And with this live stream, basically, I won't be doing one next week. And then I will be back to do the Capricorn new moon with a live stream on December 9th. So if you want to join me every other week, I would still very much love to have you. Um, it's so, it's kind of a fun story to get to tell as far as the short version of like why this change is happening now. When I very first started doing the live stream in January, that realization actually came through the Capricorn new moon. That was what I downloaded, was that, yeah, I really want to do this live stream every Friday. And at the time, I had nothing on my schedule. I was working on a project where I could work whenever I wanted to, like there was no set schedule. Um, I went months at a time without even working on it at all because I had time, I had a year. So, like, very, very loose in the scheduling department to where there's basically nothing on my calendar. And I lived like that for about 4 months and found it after that long, I found it to be very disorienting. Like, there was no way to mark time. There was, like, just blurs of 1 week into the next, and I don't know what day it is. It really doesn't matter what day it is. I do the same exact thing every single day. And it got to where it was just all one big blur, and I was, like, losing touch with reality a little bit, like, I was, like, floating out of time. And so I needed to, like, anchor myself down to the earth, the physical realm, and so I decided, like, once a week, I'm going to show up on Fridays and do a live stream on my channel, and that way, I have something on my calendar once a week, and it really did give me enough sense of my feet on the ground. It was perfect. That was, 11 months ago, and my life is not empty anymore. It's not I'm not sitting here with nothing on my calendar. I am at a spot where I have said yes to so many different fun things, again, very Gemini, very scattered energy because this is fun and this is fun and this is fun and this is fun and that's fun and that's fun and that's fun. And so many things are interesting and fun. And so I have gotten a lot of things like coming into my grid this year and which is this doesn't even count as a problem, honestly. But all of these things coming in that are fun. And so I started working on this, and that was no problem. I'm still balanced and going fine. And then I start working on this other thing. And now I'm doing all of this and still balanced, still fine. And I feel like I got to the straw that broke the camel's back kind of place. Like, not, I'm not broken or anything, but I'm getting there. I'm, like, losing my balance. I can't balance this many things, and so I'm looking around at what have I said yes to? What is on my list? Where do I spend my time? What is the value of each place that I spend my time? And it blows my mind a little bit that this cutting out every other week's live stream, that this is the thing that I'm dropping. Like, this is fun. This is so fun to get to do the live stream, to get to chat with you guys in the chat, to get to just hang out with you once a week is fun. And that can tell you how fun everything else is in the list, like, that's where I'm at. And again, this doesn't count as a problem, and I hope it doesn't sound like I'm complaining, but, like, that's where I am, is having to cut out things that are fun because other things are more fun. Other things have more juice flowing in them, and, again, very Gemini, are newer and, like, more unexplored territory, and this has gotten, like, monotonous a little bit for me as far as a routine. I'm typically not a very routined person, and so now this anchor that I tied for myself of, like, showing up every Friday, it served its purpose, and it has been so helpful for me to, like, again, feel my feet on the ground, but it's time to kind of, like, cut the anchor and be able to float towards wherever the wind is blowing me. Again, very Gemini. I think it's interesting that this shift is happening as I'm tuning into the Gemini full moon to be able to do the rest of this live stream. I personally have, like, quite a bit of energy in Gemini myself. It's one of my favorite of all the energies, because it has so many different facets, right? Like the twins, the multiple personalities sometimes, right? You just never know who you're gonna be, excuse me, when you wake up in the morning. And I have no doubt that this like, this morning, as I was thinking about making this announcement for the channel, I was worried about, is this the right decision or is it not the right decision? And that definitely, like, had me back and forth of, like, "No, but I do love doing this. Like, what do you mean I'm gonna say no to it? I'm gonna, like, stop doing part of it. Like, why? I love doing it." And it came down to kind of, like, reclaiming my power from having to do the part that does feel burdensome as far as, like, having to show up every single Friday, like, reclaiming my power from disappointing people, reclaiming my power from having to be consistent or, like, keep this streak going. Like, when I skip next Friday, that will be the first time I've skipped in 47 times, and so there's, like, all of these little Easter eggs of my power to do with this live stream, and so this morning, I reclaimed my power a lot around the whole thing, and I'm really happy with cutting it back to every other week, and that my plan is to continue that for the foreseeable future. So that is the channel update, and now we will get into this Gemini full moon that is coming up, like I said, on December 7th or 8th, depending on where you're at on the planet. It's happening at 16 degrees of Gemini. So definitely check out for you where that lands in your chart. And that basically everything we're going to share, you can kind of situate it into like whatever house that's in for you, or if 16 degrees of Gemini puts the full moon in contact with um, any of the other planets in your chart, or they're making any connections to other air signs or other mutable signs. So look at how 16 degrees of Gemini lights you up specifically. And we also have at 16 degrees Mars. So Mars got into Gemini months ago at this point and has been undergoing one of its rare retrogrades. Mars only goes retrograde once every 2 years, and it's retrograde for like 6 weeks, I think. And so overall, because of this retrograde that Mars is doing, it's spending like 7 months inside of Gemini, where it got almost to the very end of Gemini and then retrograde started and it's going almost back to the beginning and then it'll cover it all again. So Mars is doing its retrograde thing. It's heading backwards about, halfway through its retrograde or whatever. And don't quote me on that. But it's at 16 degrees at the same exact time that the full moon happens, also at 16 degrees. So that means the full moon is always exact when the moon is opposite the sun. So when they are exactly 180 degrees apart, that is the full moon. And I didn't write down the exact degrees, but it's like the full moon is at 1601 and Mars is at 1607 or something like that. It's like super close, like exactly. You just got to stand back and marvel at this entire universe and like these little timing mechanisms that how did that line up? How did that happen? That got set into motion millions of years ago and we're just here to get to see like how cool it is when it all lands right on top of each other. So the full moon is already a supercharged energy. It's already the when the moon is the brightest, the moon's influence is the most felt by those of us here on Earth. And we happen to have Mars exactly at that same location, which means that not only is the moon opposite the sun, but that Mars is also opposite the sun. So that only happens once a year, probably not even quite that often. Um, so that already is gonna be like it's a specific transit. It's a transit where we really feel our fire come alive. The sun rules Leo, Mars rules Aries. So those are both fire signs. They're both like really, really charged to assert themselves out into the world. So when you have them opposite each other, it's like Mars is trying to assert in this direction and the sun is trying to assert in this direction, like the pull of an opposition. And it's uncomfortable, to say the least. So that energy of Mars pulling opposite of the sun, these two fire assertive energies trying to go in different directions, wanting different things. Oppositions can always be harmonized, but that definitely takes some finesse. It takes some ability to listen to both ends and to take the best out of both of them and bring that to the center and kind of embody both as one harmonious unit. It's a very creative process to balance an opposition. So not only do we have that, but that is exactly happening like at the full moon. So there is an element to this full moon, this manifestation, this illumination of our Gemini energy that also has Mars in the mix. So I'm going to do my best to kind of like just take this energy one piece at a time and unpack it a little bit as far as what might we expect, what kinds of downloads are we going to get? Because that's really where I'll start is with Gemini. Gemini energy is ruled by Mercury, and its air signs are technically considered masculine, I think, but Gemini and Mercury are pretty neutral, kind of androgynous, like not really one or the other, because that's really the definition of Gemini is that it's open. The highest frequency of Gemini is a pure listener. It's a sponge. It does not discriminate whatsoever what it absorbs. It'll absorb anything and everything. It's curious endlessly. It's like again, I have a ton of Gemini, and I find it to be super abundant that the information that you can absorb just never seems to end, that there's just kind of a never ending flow of new ideas and new information that you can take into your system and get to like bat it around like a kitty with a mousey. Yeah, it's super fun to play with ideas, to play with thoughts, to play with perspectives, to play with mindsets, to try on this one and then try on this one and then try on this one. And it's 100% detached, non committal. That's where the shadow side, or, like people, Gemini energy gets a bad rap for being flaky or like two faced or non committal or, scatterbrain, or there's lots of different like insults that people can throw at Gemini energy. And to that, I would always say, one, we're all 12 of them, so careful, what boomerangs you throw out into the universe. And two, that that scatteredness, that distractibility, that ability to open your mind to new ideas, to not be tied down to what you learned yesterday and just ride that for the rest of your life. Like Gemini energy learns every day. And that just kind of depends on how dominant it is for each person, like how tuned in you are to what you're learning every day. The more Gemini energy you have, I would definitely recommend just kind of in general learning as a priority, learning as part of self care. And it could be learning about crystals, it could be learning about tarot, it could be learning about astrology, it could be learning about human behavior, it could be learning about psychology, it could be learning about how they build bridges, or how the 2008 financial collapse happened, or whatever you want. Just learn, just take in new information that you've never heard before. That's really, really energizing to Gemini energy. So that's a nice little starter pack of info about Gemini as a whole. And for, because this is a full moon, so we'll have the moon in Gemini, then we'll have the sun in Sagittarius. We're always activating a set of sister signs on a full moon. It's never just about the energy of that full moon where it's happening. We're illuminating this Gemini energy kind of in response to what the sun is illuminating in Sagittarius or in whatever sign it's in at the time of that full moon. So the two work together in okay, so like in the sponge analogy, Gemini would be the sponge dry and put it in a tub of water, and Gemini, like the sponge just sinks into the tub of water. It fills up 100% to where it's impossible to absorb anything else. And then you take the sponge out of the bucket and it's like dripping. Okay, this is Gemini. This is like the absorption rate and the dripping. Like if you've ever met a chatty Gemini, that's dripping. That's like drippage. It's a full sponge. It's got to come out somehow. And so again, if you have heavy Gemini energy, it helps to let yourself off the leash and chat away as often as you need to. I'm over here talking to myself in an empty room on the regular, like multiple times a day. And I'm not talking about like, oh yeah, I got to remember to get more, water in my cup here. Like, no, it's like a full blown, like 30-minute monologue of like whatever story I feel like telling at the time. So letting the dripping come out of the sponge of like getting to talk about what you've absorbed, that's really, really fun as far as Gemini energy is concerned. And then when you go to Sagittarius, this is not a perfect analogy, but it's basically the process of like wringing out the sponge. That the only thing that can stay in the sponge is what is true to you. All of the information that got soaked up, that Gemini doesn't discriminate. Gemini is an open slate and is taking anything that will come its way. Sagittarius has the very high, like top of the mountain kind of vantage point on what have you lived in this life and possibly even past lives that have led you to have the sense of right and wrong, true and false for yourself. So, like, Gemini just listens. Gemini is taking it all in. Sagittarius is the judge as far as like the shadow side of Sagittarius is a know-it-all. It's like thinking you know everything because technically we kind of do about our life, about our experience based on what we lived. We know what is true for us. And that is really the line between the shadow of Sagittarius and the light side of Sagittarius is whose truth are you talking about? Are you trying to preach universal truth or are you trying to tell what you believe to be true and what your life has led you to believe is true? So the sun in Sagittarius, it leads us to ask deep questions about what do we believe to be true about ourselves? What do we believe to be true about the world? And with Mars opposite the sun, so like the sun is over here asking us these deep questions like, who are you and why are you here? And Mars comes along and opposes it and asserts its force onto the sun. They're like head to head opponents. And that could very well look like people who show up and they disagree with what you believe. Okay, that's one manifestation is that you manifest a literal opponent. You manifest somebody to talk to who sees it differently than you do. And in you sharing what you believe and them offering something that they can see that is not that, you have this disagreement, which is not a bad thing. Disagreement is neutral, it's a tool. And what you choose to do from there with it will depend on the frequency of both your Sagittarius and your Gemini energies. For example, if you are lower in your Sagittarius frequency, that's dogmatic, that's rigid in your beliefs. And if you're in a lower frequency of Sagittarius, meaning you are good to go, you're set on what you believe. I've already decided. It's not up for discussion. It's not up for review. I'm not making revisions. This is my final version and I'm going with it for the rest of time. That is like kind of the shadow side of Sagittarius is making one rigid belief set and never changing it. If that's where you are in your Sagittarius energy, you don't want to listen. And the shadow side of Gemini is that you talk and you don't listen. Gemini in its shadow repeats the same thing over and over and over. It's not learning, it's not growing. It took in some information kind of seeps in through the cracks, and then you just repeat and repeat and repeat and repeat. And there's like very little taking in, right? Like higher frequency of Gemini, though, is listening. And higher frequency of Sagittarius is realizing that as you learn new information, Gemini, your beliefs about the world and what's true probably evolve. They probably evolve like every single day as you have new experiences. And in that evolution, it's not to say, the Sagittarius side, our beliefs, it's not to say that drop all of your beliefs and take on completely new beliefs all day, every day. But like belief in your psychic abilities. That's a perfect example. That's an example that I would say almost every single day, my belief in my psychic abilities evolves, as in it gets stronger and stronger and stronger and stronger. And my belief in my psychic abilities is approaching knowing, it's approaching knowledge. And that's really the highest form of Sagittarius is you're living out of your own wisdom. You've lived a life that has showed you lots of things. You've learned lots of lessons from all of the different experiences that you've had. And because of that, you have a wisdom about what is life and why am I here and which way should I go and what should I be doing? Like those are all such personal questions to answer. So much of that based in what you believe to be true. And also because of that, like, what are you listening to? What are you taking in? What new information is coming into your space? And as you take the full sponge into the Sagittarius end where you wring out the part that doesn't resonate, it's like I feel I feel like the moon Mars conjunction opposite the sun that basically what it feels like we're gonna get is a bit of a download of, like, new information coming in that feels combative to our beliefs about truth. And there's an invitation in this because the lower frequency, the shadow frequency of Mars is just fight it out. Like just to fight it out just for the sake of winning, just for the sake of like dominating. So you don't even have to be convinced that you're right. You're just fighting just to fight. So that's the low side of Mars. But in the high side of Mars, there is the conviction and the fire and the courage and the adrenaline rush, the anger, the whatever you need to fuel your body to actually fight for what is important to you. And that doesn't necessarily mean to actually fight with words with another person. The Gemini Sagittarius energy, while that axis really does hinge on taking in information from outside of yourself and Sagittarius taking in information from your personal experience, there's so much taking in information, but the end of the day, like you're not trying to convince anybody else. You're not trying to get somebody else to understand the point. You want to understand the point. So as you take in this possibly combative truth, this combative new information that someone is very convinced is true, and it feels like it is perpendicular to what you think is true. This is the invitation, is to use that as the mirror that it is and get curious. Gemini, use your questions. Thank that person for being willing to share their different viewpoint with you. What an honor it is to get to hear something so radically different from what I believe. Do you mind if I ask you some questions about that? Get curious. The highest frequency of Gemini that you can reach for is to follow your curiosity, to be genuinely open is to be curious, to have questions coming through you. That's a really good sign of a high frequency of Gemini. And so I feel this invitation, and I can feel that so many of you watching this video, especially, are going to take this kind of like, mountaintop path of taking the high road, using this opposition as a helpful clarifier of what you believe to be true. Because that is truly like you think about sharpening a knife, which I don't think I've ever physically done, but I've definitely seen, I get the process. So, like, as you take the sharpening stone and you grate it against the knife, like you're wearing down the knife, but at the end of that process, it might look aggressive and it takes some force and there's friction happening. But by the end of that process, the knife is sharp and the sharpening stone is fine, is totally fine. It's unaffected by this process. So, whoever this person is that's bringing this truth, it's not really about them. They're here to help sharpen you. And so, take that assistance, take that generous disagreement and use it, transmute it as best you can into a greater level of clarity about what you believe. It's not about finding harmony with the other person. It's not about, um, you know, agreeing with what they're saying, but Gemini full moon, like, it's about hearing them. Listen to what they're saying because you never know. You never know what piece they might have for you and how it may sound like it's so perpendicular and then you wake up the next morning with this like wild revelation because what they said, no, I don't agree with it, but it gave me this piece and that is like this, and you have this whole revelation that comes out of the seeds that they planted by disagreeing with you. So as much as we possibly can, we do our best to kind of rise above the shadow frequency of being offended by people who disagree with our beliefs and instead reach for this sense of curiosity around why do they believe that? Like Gemini is like totally curious. Like, you present me with a new idea, and all I want to do is ask you questions. Like, well, what about this? And what about this? And how does it connect with this? And what does that change with this piece? And what are the ripple effects with this? And like, just, paint me a new picture that I've never seen before. It's such a delightful energy to follow your curiosity and let yourself be enlightened, let yourself receive information that you didn't have before. Again, not because you have to be a copy of it, like that's another kind of shadow frequency of Gemini is blind agreement with whatever is standing in front of you at the time, and basically being a mirror image or a chameleon and shifting and matching whatever is in front of you at the time. Again, that's not a bad thing. It's like the sponge going into the bucket. You sink fully into what it is that you're with. You take it on, you embody it, you mirror it, you feel it in your system. And then you take the full sponge into Sagittarius and you wring it out and you get rid of everything that isn't you. So you talk to this person, you take in their disagreement, you ask them some questions, you hear them out even more, and you say, "Thank you so much for sharing with me." They're like, "So are you gonna do it my way?" "No." No, no, I'm not, but what you shared was really, really interesting because I had never thought about it from that angle, and I definitely see where how you described your experience, I can see why it led you to believe that. Yeah, I can totally understand where you're coming from. Does it change my mind? No. It doesn't, because my life led me to believe where I'm coming from. So I'm gonna hang on to that, but I do appreciate you sharing with me. We don't have to believe anything that we're listening to. You can listen and not actually absorb it, not actually like throw away who you are and be that instead. You can take it all in, feel it all. That's why we're here. We're human. Like, we wanted to feel it all. We all have Gemini energy. We all wanted to receive the new ideas and the new information. And then we get to discern. We get to pick out what feels true to you and what doesn't. And there's a great recommendation in Martha Beck's book, The Way of Integrity, that definitely reminds me of Sagittarius and like feeling for ourselves what's true. And the way she says to like kind of find your inner teacher is to, as you listen to something, as you take it in, or as you think about it, either way, how does it make your body feel? So if you're listening to something and it relaxes you, it excites you, it fills you with hope, it feels like your cork is floating. I'm just describing all the ways I feel when I listen to Abraham Hicks. Like, you can feel it in your body that this feels good. This feels good to take in. And so at that point, that's confirmation from your inner teacher as far as the Sagittarius end. When you go to wring out your sponge, keep those pieces. Keep those pieces that help your body feel relaxed and at ease. And on the other hand, you know, if when you listen, you feel enraged, you feel sick to your stomach, you feel overwhelming urges to cry. I'm thinking about watching a different media outlet. Um, that's not a good sign as far as your inner teacher is disagreeing violently with what it is that you're listening to. As far as like, again, you're not the end all be all for universal truth, but your body 100% knows what is true for you. And so if you listen to something that makes you sick to your stomach, that's not true for you, period. If it gives you tension in your shoulders and you instantly get afraid and you're sweating because, oh my God, what if that happened? It's not true. It's not true. And in the Sagittarius end, we can let go of anything that is not true for us, anything that contradicts what our inner teacher knows to be true. And we can hear our inner teacher, if nothing else, through the way our body feels as we take in information. So, this has been the Gemini full moon live stream, kind of short compared to what I normally do. But it feels like that's pretty much it. Is we can expect some new information that feels oppositional to our truth. and that is a blessing. It is a gift to let us see more clearly what it is that we believe, and to be that much more clear in our beliefs when we enter the sun moves on into Capricorn season. We have the Capricorn winter solstice on December 21st. And when we take that step, when the sun leaves Sagittarius and enters into Capricorn, the boots hit the ground as far as like, what do you believe? And now, okay, so spend your time building that. Spend your time building whatever it is that you believe to be true. Spend your time headed in that direction. Take the steps to climb that mountain. And taking action sounds really overwhelming, possibly, until you have clarity. And that is the what's in the description box of this video. So I was like getting as much as I could as far as what was trying to come through for this Gemini full moon live stream. And I ended up drawing a card out of the Wild Unknown Animal Spirit deck by Kim Krans. And the card that came up, I took a picture and I put it on the community tab. And there's a link in the description box if you want to go check that out and see the picture. But the card that came up is called the Black Egg. And the highlight is speaking from an authentic voice and the truth. The black egg contains one of life's essential treasures, the truth. Inside of it resides no confusion, excuses, small talk, noise, or lies, not even white ones. This living and breathing vessel harbors only that which rings true. When this essence is in balance, we speak slowly and clearly. We are drawn to activities like writing, reading, teaching, singing, or perhaps public speaking. Sounds draw us in. Books draw us in. The concept of truth itself draws us in. We start asking questions like, what do I know to be true about myself? And what is true about the world? When the energy of the black egg is not yet accessed, we speak from an unsure place. We say things others want to hear, we gossip, or repeat stories to justify our subpar behavior. We might even try to convince ourselves that we have no inner truth at all. The energy of the black egg hovers and waits for us to reconnect. It is available at every moment, in every situation. It's the epicenter of truth, the birthplace of our voice. The black egg and the fifth chakra. The subtle essence of this card resides at the base of the throat. The ancient sages saw this center as the hub that governs our speech and expression. It translates as especially pure. The balance of this center is important for all of us, but is especially essential for writers, editors, musicians, and teachers. All of us are getting so much clearer in who we are and what we believe is true. And when you have a clarity in what you believe to be true, taking action is easy, making decisions is easy. It's all just a matter of what do you feel in your system? What feels right to you? It's not a matter like, going back to the announcement I made at the beginning that I won't be doing weekly live streams anymore. I'll only be doing them every other week. That decision feels right in my system, and that at that point, moving forward with taking action on that decision feels easy. It feels easy and the path is clear, and there's nothing stopping me from having exactly what I want because I'm clear in what's true for me. And so that is just one small example of how clarity in your truth can make life easier. But I do see this being an important stop along the way as far as welcoming in whatever contradictory information is coming in these next few weeks and making the most out of not squashing out our opponent or anybody who might disagree with us, but taking that on board as a way to clarify further what it is that we believe, who we are, why we're here, get clear. And Capricorn season hits and it's time to take action. The Capricorn new moon is right around the corner from the Gemini full moon. And at that point, I fully expect a clear download on the action steps that you can take to move forward with whatever it is that you now have better clarity on as far as your personal truth. So this will be my last weekly live stream going forward. I will be here every other week to continue with the moon cycle, to do a live stream for the new moon and one for the full moon. Um, I have a little bit of a more detailed description at the beginning. If you missed that part, timestamps in the description. So, thank you so much for joining me to chat about this Gemini full moon. I can't wait to see how it plays out. I would love to hear from you how yours is playing out. Um, yeah. And until next time, I will be back here in 2 weeks for another live stream. Until then, I do hope you take such good care of yourselves, and so will I. Okay, bye.